You'd think cars are supposed to get you from point A to B without trying to kill you, right? Well, not always. History is full of vehicles that were complete disasters on wheels. Tiny, unstable microcars, flimsy sports cars that could fold in half, and some just plain ugly nightmares that somehow made it to production. These weren't just bad ideas. They were reckless, dangerous, and sometimes borderline criminal. Buckle up, because we're diving into the wildest automotive fails ever sold, where ambition, style, and what were they thinking collided and failed spectacularly. Number 1, 1961 Amphicar 770. At first glance, the Amphicar 770 looked like a Cold War-era dream, a vehicle that could cruise down the road and splash into the water like something out of a James Bond film. But in reality, it was more like a nightmare in both worlds. On land, the Amphicar's underpowered 43-horsepower engine struggled to push its bulky body beyond 70 mph. And even getting there felt like a dicey gamble. Its steering was sloppy, the suspension was crude, and its braking performance was laughable, especially by modern standards. In the water, things went from bad to worse. The propellers offered a pitiful 7 knots of speed, about 8 mph. And even a small wave could leave the car wobbling like a bathtub toy. Corrosion was a constant enemy, leaks were common, and heaven forbid you tried to use it in salt water. And with no meaningful safety features, not even seatbelts in early versions, an accident on land or sea could be catastrophic. Today, the Amphicar is a quirky collector's piece and a crowd pleaser at car shows. But let's be honest, it was a terrible car and an even worse boat. It stands as a classic example of how trying to do two things at once often means failing spectacularly at both. Number 2, 1962 Peel P50. The Peel P50 might be adorable, but make no mistake, this is less car and more rolling shopping cart with a motor. Built on the Isle of Man in the early 60s, it was marketed as the ultimate urban runabout. A tiny 54-inch long commuter car that could supposedly whisk you to work and back while sipping fuel. Reality check. The P50 was a death trap. With just 3 wheels, a single seat, and a 49cc engine producing a laughable 4.2 horsepower, it crawled to a top speed of 38 mph. If you were brave enough to try. It also lacked a reverse gear, so you had to physically drag it backwards by hand if you parked facing the wrong way. Its brakes were barely adequate for a bicycle, and its fiberglass body offered no protection in a crash. In a collision with a modern vehicle, the driver would likely come off worse than the bumper. The Peel P50 remains a novelty, even a Guinness World Record holder as the smallest production car ever made. But it's also a chilling reminder of how little safety meant in the early days of microcars. Cute? Absolutely. Practical or safe? Not even close. Number 3, 1966 Bond Bug. Prototype. The Bond Bug looked like something straight out of a 1970s sci-fi cartoon. All sharp angles, bright orange paint, and futuristic optimism. But during its prototype phase in the mid-1960s, this 3-wheeled oddball was less space-age mobility and more rolling accident. The biggest problem, physics. With 2 wheels in the back and 1 up front, the Bug's weight distribution was completely off balance. At low speeds, it felt twitchy and unstable. At high speeds, it was downright terrifying. Taking a corner too quickly could send the entire car tipping over. Combine that with a tiny 700cc engine that strained to hit 75 mph. And brakes that felt like they were borrowed from a lawnmower, and you had a recipe for disaster. Even once production started in 1970, the Bond Bug remained more of a curiosity than a practical car. But during development, it was so unstable that test drivers had to constantly adjust weight distribution and tire pressure just to keep it from flipping. It's a fun piece of automotive history, but one that proves style without substance can be a dangerous mix. Number 4, 1969 Subaru 360. The cheap and ugly death trap. When Subaru launched the 360 in the US, they hoped to capture the booming small car market. What they delivered instead was one of the most dangerous cars ever sold on American roads. With a puny 350 gas two-cylinder engine producing just 25 horsepower, the 360 struggled to reach 60 mph, and even then it took over 35 seconds to get there. On highways dominated by muscle cars and heavy sedans, that was a death sentence. Its lightweight construction, while good for fuel economy, meant the body was essentially paper thin. In a collision, the 360 crumpled like a soda can, offering virtually no protection to its occupants. The brakes were weak, the suspension soft, and the handling unpredictable, all of which made emergency maneuvers nearly impossible. Consumer Reports famously labeled it not acceptable, calling it cheap and ugly, and warning buyers to stay far away. Unsurprisingly, sales tanked, and the car vanished from U.S. showrooms almost as quickly as it arrived. Today, the Subaru 360 is a quirky collector's item, but in its time, it was one of the most unsafe and ill-suited cars ever unleashed on American roads. Number 5. 1970s Ford Pinto. The explosive economy car scandal. If there's one car that became the poster child for corporate negligence, it's the Ford Pinto. On paper, the Pinto was supposed to be Ford's answer to the growing demand for small, affordable cars during the fuel crisis. But behind the scenes, cost-cutting decisions turned it into one of the most dangerous vehicles ever built. The infamous flaw was in its fuel tank placement. Positioned just behind the rear axle and with little structural reinforcement, the tank was frighteningly vulnerable in even low-speed rear-end collisions. A light tap from another car could rupture the tank, sending gasoline spilling out, and in many cases turning the Pinto into a rolling fireball. Internal Ford documents later revealed that the company knew about the defect but decided not to fix it, calculating that paying out lawsuit settlements would be cheaper than a recall. The scandal that followed destroyed Ford's reputation and became a defining example of profit over safety thinking in the auto industry. Today, the Pinto is remembered less as a car and more as a cautionary tale, a grim reminder of what happens when corners are cut at the cost of human lives. Number 6. 1957-59 Austin Healey Sprite MKI Bugeye. A smile that could kill. The Austin Healey Sprite MKI earned the affectionate nickname Bugeye, or Frog Eye in the UK, for its wide-eyed headlights and cheerful little face. But behind that friendly appearance was one of the least forgiving sports cars of its era, designed to be cheap, light, and fun. The Sprite cut corners everywhere, especially when it came to safety. Seatbelts? Optional. Crumple zones? Non-existent. The car's wafer-thin body panels offered next to no protection in a crash, and its low weight made it prone to flipping if you took a corner too aggressively. With such a short wheelbase and rudimentary suspension, even skilled drivers had to be cautious. A small mistake could send the Sprite spinning or rolling with little warning. Despite these flaws, the Bugeye Sprite was beloved for its simplicity and charm. But there's no denying it was dangerously unsafe by any modern measure. It might have been fun on a Sunday drive, but one wrong move, and that smiley little face could quickly become a deadly frown. Number 7. 1970s Lancia Stratos prototype. A rally rocket on the edge. The Lancia Stratos is a motorsport legend. A rally car so revolutionary it dominated the World Rally Championship. But before it became a champion, it was an unstable, borderline lethal prototype that tested the limits of physics. The Stratos' radical wedge-shaped design and ultra-short wheelbase gave it unmatched agility on tight rally stages. The problem? That same setup made it extremely twitchy and unpredictable, especially at high speeds. Combine that with a mid-mounted Ferrari V6 engine that delivered explosive power and zero electronic aids, and you had a machine that could, and often did, snap out of control without warning. Early prototypes lacked even basic safety features. No roll cages, no crumple zones, and little occupant protection if things went wrong. And they did go wrong. Test drivers reported numerous near rollovers, and more than one car ended up on its roof during development. The production Stratos eventually became a racing icon, but its prototype phase was a wild and dangerous experiment. It was a perfect example of how chasing performance without considering safety can make a brilliant car downright deadly. Number 8. 1970s AMC Gremlin. The awkward little car with big safety problems, AMC's Gremlin is often remembered for its bizarre styling. A car that looked like someone chopped the back half off a sedan. But the real problem wasn't how it looked, it was how it handled. With a short wheelbase and stubby rear end, the Gremlin was inherently unstable, especially during sudden maneuvers. Hard braking or quick lane changes could unsettle the chassis, causing the rear end to swing wide, or the car to lose control altogether. Crash tests revealed more grim news. Its small size and weak structure meant it absorbed impacts poorly, often resulting in more severe injuries compared to similar cars of its era. And with limited safety equipment, no side impact protection, and rudimentary seatbelts, even minor collisions could have major consequences. Despite its flaws, the Gremlin sold fairly well thanks to its low price and quirky charm. But in hindsight, it was a rolling reminder that cutting corners on design and engineering can have serious safety consequences. It wasn't just ugly, it was dangerous. Number 9. 1950s Messerschmitt KR200, a fighter jet cockpit on 3 wheels. The Messerschmitt KR200 looked more like a miniature aircraft canopy than a car, and that was no coincidence. Designed by an aircraft manufacturer after World War II, it featured tandem seating under a bubble canopy, handlebars instead of a steering wheel, and a 3-wheeled layout that made it feel more like a grounded airplane than an automobile. But while it was quirky and efficient, it was also terrifyingly unsafe. With just 3 wheels, stability was always a concern, especially during cornering or emergency maneuvers. There was virtually no side protection. A direct hit from another vehicle could crush the KR200 like a tin can. Braking performance was equally minimal, and its lightweight construction meant that even a low-speed collision could have catastrophic results. Despite these risks, the KR200 gained a cult following among budget-conscious post-war Europeans. But in modern traffic, it would be a nightmare, a fragile, slow, and dangerously underprotected relic from a time when safety was barely an afterthought. Number 10. 1960s Renault Dauphine, the slippery French death trap. The Renault Dauphine was supposed to be France's answer to the Volkswagen Beetle, a cheap, cheerful family car that anyone could afford. What buyers got instead was a dangerously under-engineered machine that quickly earned a reputation for poor handling and dismal safety. One of its biggest flaws was its tendency to oversteer, a side effect of its rear-engine layout, skinny tires, and weak suspension. This made the Dauphine unpredictable in corners, often spinning out with little warning. The brakes were notoriously weak and prone to fading. And the car's lightweight construction offered minimal crash protection. Even a minor fender bender could result in serious injuries. Critics panned the Dauphine for its alarming lack of control, and U.S. road testers called it one of the worst cars ever sold in America. It was slow, unstable, and fragile, a deadly combination on highways increasingly filled with bigger, faster vehicles. Number 11. 1960s Fiat 500, original. Italy's adorable death trap. Few cars are as beloved as the original Fiat 500, a symbol of Italy's post-war recovery and urban mobility. But as charming as it was, this pint-sized classic was also one of the most unsafe vehicles ever put on the road. Its tiny size meant there was almost no structural protection in a crash. The body panels were thin and flexible, crumpling under even modest impacts. Safety features like crumple zones, airbags, or reinforced doors simply didn't exist. The brakes were weak and required significant effort to stop the car, while the handling could become twitchy at higher speeds due to the short wheelbase and narrow tires. In today's world, the original 500 wouldn't stand a chance in crash testing. It would fail almost immediately. Yet despite its glaring safety shortcomings, it became a cultural icon. It may have been cute and economical, but stepping into one was always a gamble. Number 12. 1950s Kaiser Darren. A fiberglass fantasy with fatal flaws, the Kaiser Darren is one of the most beautiful American sports cars of the 1950s, and also one of the most dangerously impractical. Its signature feature was its unique sliding doors, which retracted into the front fenders rather than swinging outward. While innovative, they offered almost no side impact protection and could jam shut during an accident, trapping occupants inside. The car's fiberglass body, though lightweight and stylish, shattered easily in collisions, offering little structural safety. With no crumple zones, rudimentary seatbelts, and minimal chassis reinforcement, even a low-speed crash could result in serious injuries. Worse still, the Darren's long, low nose and poor weight distribution made it tricky to handle at speed. And if things went wrong, drivers had virtually no safety net. Despite its beauty, the Kaiser Darren is remembered today as a cautionary tale. Proof that style without safety can be a deadly mix.